2 words on this exam decide whether the same trade earns a commission or a markup, and almost everybody treats them as synonyms: broker and dealer. They aren't the same job, and FINRA writes questions specifically to find out whether you know that. And there's a settlement rule that changed in 2024 which quietly rewrote answers that were correct the year before, so hold that thought. 12 of your 75 scored items sit in Section 1, and the ones people lose here aren't the hard ones. They're the ones where 2 roles look interchangeable and aren't.
Lewis here. And the cleanest way in is who owns the security at the moment the trade happens.
Tiffany here. A broker never owns it. A broker acts as your agent, goes out and finds the other side and puts the 2 of you together.
Agent. That's the word to file, because the exam uses it directly. The broker is acting for you, and the security passes between you and somebody else.
A dealer does own it. A dealer sells you something out of its own inventory or buys yours into its own inventory. That's acting as principal.
So with a dealer, the firm is on the other side of your trade. It's not standing beside you, it's opposite you.
And that ownership difference is what drives how the firm gets paid, which is the second half of every question on this.
A broker charges a commission because it performed a service for you. It found the trade.
A dealer takes a markup when it sells to you, or a markdown when it buys from you. It's not charging a fee. It's adjusting the price of its own goods.
And notice the shape of what we just did because it repeats. We didn't memorize which one takes a commission. We asked who owned the security, and the payment method fell out of the answer. On this exam, a fact you can derive beats 2 facts you have to hold, and the same firm can do both, on different trades, on the same day. Which is exactly why the exam has to ask which capacity it acted in.
And there's a reason a firm might choose one capacity over the other on a given trade, which makes the distinction less arbitrary than it looks. In a thin market, if nobody else is selling the bond you want at that moment, an agent has nothing to find for you. A dealer can simply sell you one out of its own holdings. The capacity follows what the market can actually supply.
Erica, is that not a distinction without a difference for the customer? The money leaves either way.
That's worth someone answering properly because it sounds reasonable and it's wrong in an important way. Let me pause for just a second because this genuinely helps. If you are getting value here, hit that like button, then subscribe and ring the bell. It costs you nothing, and it is the single biggest thing that keeps these videos coming. Lewis said the money leaves either way, so why should a customer care which hat the firm wore? It's a fair challenge, and the answer isn't about the money.
It's worth someone taking a part who works on how these obligations differ.
Professor Vance studies how intermediaries in financial markets are obligated to their customers, and pointed at Lewis's exact objection before we started.
Lewis is right that the customer pays either way. What changes is what the firm owed the customer while it was arranging that payment. As an agent, the firm is working on your behalf, and that carries obligations about how it handles your order.
And as a principal?
As a principal, it's your counterparty. Its inventory position and your interest aren't automatically aligned, and the rules recognize that by requiring the capacity to be disclosed rather than left for you to infer.
Disclosed where, in practice?
On the trade confirmation the customer receives. That document states the capacity, and it's the reason the exam can ask the question at all. The information isn't hidden, it's printed.
So the honest version of Lewis's point is that the cost may be similar and the relationship is genuinely different.
And I wouldn't oversell the difference either. A dealer marking up a bond isn't doing something improper. Firms hold inventory precisely so a customer can trade when nobody else is on the other side that second. That service has a price.
And there's a practical reason the confirmation matters beyond the exam. If you ever want to know what a trade actually cost you, the capacity line tells you where to look. An agency trade shows the commission as a separate figure you can read. A principal trade folds the firm's compensation into the price itself, so there's no line item to find.
So the dealer model earns its keep. It's just a different arrangement.
A different arrangement with different obligations, disclosed to you. That's the whole of it, and it's all the exam wants.
Is there a phrasing that signals which one a question means?
Watch for the words capacity, agency, and principal, and for from its own inventory. Any of those settles it immediately. And if a question describes a commission, it has already told you the firm acted as an agent, whether or not it used the word.
Professor Vance, thank you. A commission being a tell for agency is going straight in my notes.
Lewis is the one who asked whether the distinction was real. Keep asking that. Half of what looks like trivia on this exam isn't.
One business day. That's how long you now have between trading and settling, and if your study material says 2, it's out of date and it will cost you a question.
This is the one I flagged at the top, and it's the clearest example on the whole exam of why the year on your material matters.
The standard settlement cycle for most broker-dealer transactions shortened from 2 business days to 1, and it took effect on May 28, 2024.
Under an amended Exchange Act Rule 15C6-1, subsection A, that rule number is worth recognizing even if you never recite it.
And it's worth being precise about what those 2 dates actually mean, because people blur them.
Trade date is the day the trade is agreed. That's when the price is set, and when you're committed.
Settlement date is the day the exchange actually completes. Cash moves one way, the security moves the other, and ownership formally transfers.
So under T+1, a trade agreed on a Monday settles on the Tuesday, assuming both are business days. It's worth naming who actually does the settling, because the exam treats it as background and then asks about it. The trade you agree with your firm is cleared and settled through a central clearing system rather than firm to firm. That's what makes a one-day cycle possible at all. Millions of trades net down before any cash moves.
And that assumption is where questions get built. Does a Friday trade settle on Saturday? It doesn't. Seed. Because these are business days and not calendar days.
It settles Monday, and a holiday in between pushes it again.
Which is the whole reason to know it as a rule rather than as a number. The number is 1. The rule is 1 business day.
And the reason regulators shortened it's worth a sentence, because it makes the fact stick, and it's worth knowing that the change was phased in across the whole market at once, rather than firm by firm. Everybody moved on the same day, because a settlement cycle only works if both sides are on it. That's also why the date is so clean and so quotable, and why any material written before it's uniformly wrong rather than partly wrong.
Every day between trade and settlement is a day where one side might fail to deliver. Shortening the window shrinks the amount of unsettled risk sitting in the system at any moment.
Less time exposed, less that can go wrong. Which brings us to the other place a number gets tested, and it's the one where somebody else lends you money. %50. That's how much of a new margin purchase a broker is allowed to lend you, and the body that sets, it's not the one most people guess.
And this connects straight back to episode 10, which is why it's worth doing carefully.
Professor Vance is back with us for this.
The rule is Regulation T, and it comes from the Federal Reserve Board, not from the SEC and not from FINRA. That surprises people because everything else in a brokerage account seems to come from those two.
Why the Fed?
Because margin is credit, and credit in the economy is the Federal Reserve's territory. Regulation T is a credit rule that happens to live in a brokerage. Once you see it that way, the ownership stops being surprising.
And the 50% figure itself?
FINRA states it plainly. Brokers can lend a customer up to 50% of the total purchase price of a margin equity security for new purchases. Up to. It's a ceiling on the loan, not a fixed amount.
So a $10,000 purchase means at least $5,000 of your own money at the start.
At the start. And that phrase is where the second rule enters, because Regulation T governs the opening of the position and says nothing about what happens afterwards.
Which is FINRA's rule rather than the Fed's.
Rule 4210, and FINRA describes it as specifying maintenance requirements that set a limit to the value that an account can lose. Initial margin from one body, ongoing maintenance from another,
and a warning on the 50%, because it's a ceiling and people read it as a promise. A firm is allowed to require more than half from you, and many do on volatile names. Regulation T caps how much can be lent. It never obliges a broker to lend that much, and a question can turn on exactly that word.
That's the same shape as the municipal split from last time.
It's the same habit paying off twice, two bodies, two moments in the life of the same account. If a question is about opening a position, think Federal Reserve. If it's about an account that has fallen in value, think FINRA.
Professor Vance, thank you. Opening versus ongoing is a cleaner hook than trying to memorize which rule number belongs to whom.
Tiffany spotted the pattern from the last episode before I could point at it, which is exactly the right instinct. Look for the repeat.
So how do you actually use all of this when a question is in front of you and the clock is running?
3 questions, and between them they settle most of what Section 1 asks about a trade.
First, did the firm act as agent or as principal? Commission means agent. Markup, markdown, or from its own inventory means principal.
Second is the question about trade date or settlement date. Those are different days, and a question will often give you one and want the other.
And one more habit that pays across the whole exam, not just Section 1. When a question gives you a day of the week, it wants you to count. Nobody writes Tuesday into a question by accident. The moment you see a weekday, assume the settlement arithmetic is the point of the question rather than decoration.
And count in business days. That single habit is worth more than remembering the number, because the number is 1 and the arithmetic is where people slip.
Third is the margin question about opening a position or maintaining one. Opening is Regulation T from the Federal Reserve. Maintaining is FINRA Rule 4210.
And there's a caveat on all of this that I want to state rather than let you discover in the exam room.
The shortcuts are shortcuts. Commission usually means agency, and there are trades where the language is less tidy than the ones in a textbook.
So use them to move fast on the clear questions and slow down on the ones that feel deliberately worded. That's what the flag button is for.
And the wider habit from today is the one about dates. Settlement moved in 2024, and anything you learned from material older than that deserves a second look.
Not just settlement, any figure with a year attached.
Next time we take on the types of markets. Primary and secondary, and the two that people forget exist at all. If one thing survives today, make it agent versus principal. Who owned the security decides the answer, and everything else about the trade follows from that one fact.
And settlement is 1 business day now, not 2.
If you're working toward this exam, subscribing keeps the course arriving in order, and the free practice sets on the site cover exactly these 3 questions. So before you go, tell me, what's the oldest study material you're still using? Go and check its settlement chapter tonight. This is Professor Erica, and I will see you in episode 12.